Hey, it's Marcel. I am geeked up about my new book that just got released worldwide. If you haven't heard, it's called Humane Leadership Lead with Radical Love, Be a Kick Ass Boss. Now, if you love the podcast, you're going to love the book. I spent several years researching the best skills and behaviors of people leaders that engage employees and drive results through a humane approach of empowering humanity, developing trust, and getting the best out of people. It's out now. Get it wherever books are sold. Humane Leadership. Lead with Radical Love, be a kick-ass boss. Check the link in the show notes and grab your copy. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love, joy, purpose, care, and inclusion, it's going to make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about actionable, practical love, the verb, as a leadership and business strategy. Let's get rolling. Hey gang, welcome back to the show. Glad you are here. I am so geeked up about today's guest. I'm bringing to the show Tony Martignetti. Tony is the founder and chief inspiration officer of Inspired Purpose Partners, which is a leadership development firm. Tony is a leadership advisor, a best-selling author, podcast host, speaker, entrepreneur, idea generator, people connector, and a curious adventurer. He brings together over 30 years of business and leadership experience and extreme curiosity, which we're going to talk about, to elevate leaders and equip them with the tools to navigate through change and unlock their true potential. And speaking of best-selling author, Tony wrote Campfire Lessons for Leaders, How Uncovering Our Past Can Propel Us Forward. And there it is if you're watching on YouTube. And I'm happy to have Tony join me now. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Marcel. It's just wonderful to be in conversation with you again, because I had you on my show recently.
That's right. And full disclosure, the gang, we did a podcast swap. I'm like, Tony, bring me on and I'll return the favor. And so here we are. Tony's on the show. Hey, we start the show like this, as we do with every guest. You ready?
I'm ready.
What's your story?
What's my story? All right. So my story is that I was an artist as a child who really connected with the idea of developing worlds that had emotional experiences. How's that for a mic drop moment? I, of course, went the path of most artists, where you realize you have to do something that's going to make you money. So I went pre-med instead of going into art. But you know that element of the artist doesn't go away. It just stays in your heart, and just gets stuffed down a little bit. And as I went into the world as, pre-med, then I switched into business because I realized that maybe being a doctor wasn't my path, but I spent most of my career working in biotech. So I got this chance to live in the world of science and business, and it was a wonderful journey. I spent 25 years working in life science industry, where I got a chance to work in finance and strategy roles. It's a wonderful journey. And I worked on some amazing therapeutics and did a lot of deals to help bring new therapies to life. But then eventually found myself feeling like something was missing. And that's what led me to this path of deciding to leave the corporate world and start my journey into leadership development and coaching, and starting my own firm, Inspired Purpose Partners, about 7 years ago.
But bring me back to something was missing. What exactly in your heart of hearts did you feel was that empty spot there that was missing?
Yeah, I mean, here I am, like outwardly successful, but I just felt like I didn't feel in connection with who I truly was. And I think I was always seeking, and I always jokingly say that if there was a movie made about me, that I was the lost wayfinder. the misguided wayfinder. And for me, it was, I really loved people and I loved learning about their journeys. And I was super curious about, what made people do what they did. And that's what I felt like was missing for me was a sense of why am I using one side of my brain, the analytical side, as opposed to the artistic side, and feeling frustrated that I was just not using my full capacity, but I didn't know what to do besides continue to move forward. And what was really missing was that I just felt like my heart was not in it any
Yeah.
longer.
Yes. Because, when you're coaching and advising high level leaders, maybe the analytical side kicks in a little bit. Okay, that never
Yeah.
goes away because we have to reason and have logic, et cetera. But Tony, the the this speaks to me as
Mm.
well because I only found my calling when I finally realized that I wasn't truly bringing out the best
Mhm.
or all of me in my chosen profession, which if you go back 20 years, it was HR. I was, an HR manager, HR guy,
Mhm.
but it wasn't lighting me up
Yeah.
until I found this path towards helping other leaders succeed and in serving them well to propel them to be successful. And that's when it was a wake up call. It's just like, I'm never going back. Never going back to the corporate world, even though I am in the corporate world, but
Yeah.
now I'm
Yeah.
in a different way of serving others. Is I'm no longer, serving quote the man in the penthouse, if you will. I know that's in
Oh, yeah.
2025, maybe that's not a good term to use, but
Yes.
it's now being able to help create pathways for people to truly tap into who they are as
Yeah.
leaders. And I think that putting yourself in that role where you realize for you, okay, this is what lights me up. Same thing for me. And that's when my journey to fulfilling my calling began, is in service to other leaders. I don't know. Does that resonate at all with you?
100%. I mean, I think, hearing you say that and, I hear it from a lot of people and it doesn't mean you have to leave the corporate world to find that. I think one of the things that's so important is that, listening to people's stories and hearing them connect with these things about themselves that they often put to the side. I think one of the things that I've really started to connect with lately is this for us to be fully expressed, it's about letting in the parts that we put aside and hold back or say, like, oh, that I can't bring that in. But we need to bring those in because when we feel fully ourselves, then we show up with our full selves into the workplace,
Yeah.
but also into the work.
Yeah.
And as you know, this will resonate with you because of what you talk about is that that's where our love shows in the work. Because when we show the love of who we are in the work, things change.
Yeah, you're already delving into some aspects of the book, Campfire Lessons for Leaders. But before we dive
Yeah.
in your own words, Tony,
Mm.
define the meaning of leadership for us.
Yes. One of the things that I often talk about is this idea that like as a leader, you are in service to the people around you. And being of service is not what people think it is. Sometimes they think of it as being like giving, 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 giving. But sometimes it's about being of service in a way that shows that you're caring for the people in your circle. And what that means is that you're caring for their growth, that you care for what they want in the world, that you know what they envision for themselves, and you're helping to unlock that for them.
Yeah.
So leaders are shepherds for the growth and for the vision that the people around them have, but also aligning them towards something that's bigger than they could do on their own.
Yeah, I love the metaphor of the leader as shepherd. I'm visualizing that now. So let's talk about the book. Okay. Yeah. describe for us, basically. I mean, how did you go about getting all of these lessons, campfire lessons together? And I love speaking of metaphors because I mean, it's
Mhm.
on the cover. Is there's a picture of a campfire, and if it gives you that feeling of, oh, okay, let me sit down and hear all these stories because it's storytelling is the best way I think to kind of help teach leadership skills right through storytelling, and you got a bunch of that in your book. So talk about the journey to writing this book. What was that like?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll start by saying I wanted to create that somatic experience. It's like you're not going to just sit here and, read this with like the idea that you're going to take away business lessons. It's more about get into yourself, allow yourself to slow down and listen. So that was intentional.
Yeah.
The idea of the book really, I'll just take it even further back from the book to the podcast. Originally the podcast was the virtual campfire was this idea of bringing people together to share stories through what I called it was going to be called something very different. It was going to be called Divergent Minds, Convergent Hearts. And
Okay.
I wanted to bring people together who thought differently
Yeah.
to share stories and talk about ideas that they may not agree with, but to get to know each other and to maybe see each other in different ways. But of course, the pandemic happened
Mm.
and that shifted everything. And it became a podcast where I would be one on one with, interesting people sharing stories. And as I went on that journey, something that I didn't think I would ever be doing is podcasting. I realized that these stories were too rich for me to just leave on in the ether. I
Mm.
needed to create some vehicle to bring them to life in a different way. And so that's when the idea of the book came to life, is this idea that I almost had an obligation to share them. And I had to do it in a different way because I realized that every time I would sit down and talk to these amazing people, I realized that there was some key themes that were showing up. And as I started organizing the book, I realized these lessons were powerful and something that people could learn from. At the core of the book, and I won't ramble much longer, but I will say at the core of the book is really this idea that, we need to connect with our story so we can better know ourselves. And
Yeah.
when we do that, we can connect better with others. So the core of the book is really deeper connection.
Yeah. And this could be a sort of a scary element for some people because the subtitle is How Uncovering Our Past Can
Mhm.
Propel Us Forward. A lot of people don't want to go uncover the past because the past is full of skeletons in the closet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is the essence of why it's important for us to think about this. One book that came out that I'll just mention that always got me thinking, like I should have wrote that book too, is Daniel Pink's Power of Regret. Yes. I might have gotten the title slightly wrong, but he really digs into this idea that there is some power of regret. And my book is kind of similar in that way, is this idea that we have to look back and say, what are the things that, in our past that we need to really understand better? Yeah. It's not that we regret them. It's just that we need to understand them so that we can use them as tools for the future.
Yeah.
Because whether you like it or not, those things are lessons they've become part of us. And we can either run away from them or we can use them as ways to say, who am I now because of that event?
Yeah.
And how can I use that?
And I love it. And even more, I think more powerful are those people that have done the work of healing and out of a bad experience where they recovered from it, they experienced transformation.
Yes.
And how can you not want to share that with the world? Because I mean, and again, I speak to those who have done the work of
Yeah.
if you've gone through some kind of emotional trauma or hardship or failure, and you're
Mm.
able to come out okay on the other side of it, that is a story that needs to be told over and over and over again.
Mhm.
If you are now in a place where you are doing well and succeeding in life.
Yeah.
So
And I just wanted to say one
yeah,
thing, that not everything has to be like a dark moment. Sometimes it's just like, a realization that as you look back and you say like, oh my gosh, so when I was a child, I was doing this and I didn't realize it until I started to get further along and saw that was the realization of who I was going to be. And when I started to look back and saw my childhood self, it was the realization of who I am. And I needed to make sure I reconciled with it's okay to be connected to that childhood self,
Yeah.
myself as the artist. Now I've integrated that part of who I am into the work I do now, which is wonderful because now I feel more whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the people that you interviewed and you put in the book is the prolific Dory Clark, and I've had her on the show as well. And you actually said that this is one of your favorites. Well, it was one of your favorite conversations. And here's the subtitle from the chapter. You have the power to create your world. Dory Clark, embracing the unexpected on a journey to discover your entrepreneurial self. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about some of the lessons that you learned from Dory.
Oh, I mean, we would need like at least a day for that because she's just a wealth of great insights. But also the way she shares, it doesn't come from a place of like from a high and mighty or look at me and so amazing. It comes from a place of humility and trial and error. And I think the key thing for Dory is that you know she started out in this world of journalism and writing articles and realizing that at some point there was a realization that that wasn't going to be her path. And she, in fact, lost her job and had to figure out how to restart herself. And it's just wonderful to see how an early beginning can fast forward to a world where she started to see how she can create something on her own
Yeah.
that was so unique and different than most people could ever have imagined. And now she's making an impact on many people's lives
Yeah.
through something she created of her own volition. And I think that's wonderful. And now she's even doing things that are even further afield, creating Broadway shows, doing things that really light her up.
Yeah.
And when I think about creating your world in that way, that's what you start to be able to see the possibilities that come from that.
Yeah.
But you first have to get out of your own way of saying, I'm a journalist and that's the title I hold and that's where I need to stay. Instead, it's about allowing yourself to see possibilities.
I wonder if that sort of one-track mind mentality comes from maybe a family of origin, the way that your upbringing, where parents instill this identity on you. Perhaps your dad was a journalist, and now you feel you have to, follow in the footsteps, right? Or becoming a journalist, or a doctor, or a lawyer, or a police officer, where it doesn't deep down inside, it doesn't feel like this is what you should be doing for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. And, my old man, he's now in his late 80s, well into his retirement now, but he wanted me to pursue the path of the family business, which was selling computer parts and fixing computers and all that. And, there was a little bit of there was some guilt involved in that because I didn't want to disappoint my old man. I wanted to make him happy and take over the business for him. But I knew deep down inside nothing about that spoke to me
Yeah.
at the core of my being. And I'm wondering, and to Dory's point as well, like I'm wondering if we sometimes hold ourselves back because of the ideals that have been paved ahead for us, even though that's not the path we want to take. It's been kind of forced on us.
I couldn't agree more, but I also would say there's two things that could that happen. And I think in Dory's case, it was probably more the latter than what you described. Because definitely in my case, it's what you described, this sense of like you feel beholden to the vision of the people who have come before. But with Dory, it's also necessity was the mother of invention because she lost her job and then she struggled to find a new path. And so she almost was an accidental entrepreneur because she had to find a way to make a different living. So it was, that's something I've also seen in a lot of people where they've, found themselves doing something different because they just had to find a way to do something different because they have no other option but to do something different. And I think about it right now where AI is, and I'm not saying AI is taking all our jobs, but hey, we should be careful. We sometimes have to think, what is the pivot I'm going to make that will put me in a different trajectory? Because sometimes the jobs that we had are no longer there, and we need to think, what could I do differently? And I think that's something I've seen and covered in a lot of the conversations I've had.
I want to switch to another topic and chapter. You talk about embracing emotional courage, and that's one of my favorite topics to talk about in general because I work with leaders who struggle with embracing their uncertainty and being more courageous with showing up emotionally with with all their faculties and being truly authentic with people, right? So all of this is in the chapter with Peter Bregman. And folks, by the way, I've been trying to get Peter on my show for years, and thanks to Tony. Tony made the intro to Peter. So first shout out to Peter because he's going to be coming to the show hopefully in the next few weeks or so. But talk about the lessons there from Peter about embracing emotional courage. Maybe put some definition about what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how much of an impact Peter's had on me in so many more ways than he even knows. First of all, emotional courage is in my own definition because I don't want to necessarily put too much pressure on myself to get it right. But for me, emotional courage is being willing to put yourself out there and feel all the things that go along with doing things that are out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
So, one of the quotes that I always think about when it comes to emotional courage is, if you're willing to feel everything, you can have anything. And that means, embracing all of the range of emotions that are out there as you go out into the unknown, into new paths of uncertainty. And when you do that, you're able to grow. And I think about the journey I've been on, and many times that's exactly what I've embodied, is this ability to say, I'm going to take this leap into something that I don't know. And in doing so, I'm going to grow through that. And sure, there's going to be highs and lows, but that's just part of the game of life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And you're sort of delving into the area of vulnerability and being okay with uncertainty. And that's
yeah.
still a hard thing to do if you're a high level leader, because the higher you go, the less vulnerable you become because you think you have all the answers,
Yes.
right? Or you don't want to show your true colors, or you don't want to show any semblance of weakness, air quotes, weakness,
Yes. Yes.
because you have to show up with all your strength and here's the air quotes again, executive presence, right?
Yep.
People can't see that side of you. But what would you say to those high level executives, maybe the CEO of a company? What's the first step in embracing your emotional courage? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I guess the first starting point is, when you start to feel, as though you're not, you're trying to be perfect, you're trying to be the person who knows it all. That is it's a very thin veil. It's a mask.
Mm,
And what we need to do is, say, what am I not truly aligning with right now? Because that very thing is going to require me to really show up with people authentically. So I guess one of the first steps you can do to get on that path is to say to yourself, who am I really, and how am I really showing up to embody that?
yeah.
And this is where my work has really come full circle, is this idea of like making sure that people know what part of me has been staying on the sidelines, and how do I ensure that that part is now coming back to the table so I can fully express to other people who I am and not hold it back. And that is vulnerable.
That is vulnerable. Yeah. And it also takes, I would say, a humble leader to be able to do that, which is another strength of a great leader, is humility
Yeah.
to just kind of take off the mask. Yeah. Well
Yes.
stated, Tony. Well stated. All right.
Mm.
Another chapter I really like is a fight for what you believe in. What are some teachable moments there from your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really important around fighting for what you believe in is this element of like making sure that you surround yourself with people who believe in you first and foremost. It's when I think about the people who have been on a journey of putting themselves out there, getting courageous and doing things, is they need to make sure that they're surrounding themselves with other people who believe in them and encourage them on the path because ultimately, when you believe in something, when someone believes in you, they reinforce your fight. In other words, the fight for something that's really meaningful. And so those things are critical for the process of becoming who you really are. Is having leaders who are on the path with you who can say, "I see this in you, and I know you've got it." And I know what you need to do. I know you're on the right path to doing this. And that encouragement goes such a long way. I think back to some of the leaders who I've worked with who have seen something in me that I didn't even know I even existed. And with that, it just creates that cycle of being able to move me forward and try new things, unlock new levels.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a huge proponent, I know you are too, because it's in your all over your book, but, of activating your curiosity,
Mhm.
for so many reasons, but I'll let you guide us as to why curiosity is so important in leadership, okay? I don't wanna steal your thunder here, so maybe start there. Talk about how curiosity plays a role in leadership, and why is that so important in the journey?
Yeah. Well, first of all, curiosity on the surface, sometimes you'll be like, oh, of course we're curious here. That's what we do. If we're not curious, what are we in business for? But the reality is sometimes a surface level curiosity, people thinking, well, I asked the question, but just asking the question is not enough. We have to allow ourselves to luxuriate in the curiosity, which means to really sit with questions a little longer. And I think that's why it's so critical that leaders have the patience to be curious. And I
Mhm.
think that's one thing that's missing a lot in in leadership forums and leadership in workplaces in general, is the ability to be curious about the right things and to be curious a little longer. And that curiosity is asking people, what's important to them.
Yeah.
What are the things that light them up? What are the things that they think are missing in the world right now that we need more of? And listening. I think curiosity is not just about the question, it's about the listening to what happens when we ask the questions
Mm.
and allowing that to be part of the process of being curious. And then the last part of this is to make sure we're not limiting our curiosity into one field. It has to be, I use this term a lot, multidimensional curiosity, which means that, we need to be thinking what's outside of my field of view and maybe cross pollinating into areas that are not normally part of my work. So if you're in biotech, for example, maybe it's about, I need to get curious about what's happening in the design field or what's happening in the world of tech or in the materials field or whatever it may be, because all those things are coalescing, are converging into, ways that we can all work together. So I think that's where curiosity can be a huge payoff, is asking more questions, but also make sure that they're multidimensional in nature.
Yeah. You have spoken to some prominent artists
Mhm.
and musicians. Talk about the intersection of art and business. This is sort of a new world for me here. Okay. So I'm going to lean on you on this one and maybe why we should tap into creativity. M- I think more than ever before because AI is doing so much of the creative work for us.
Yeah. I can talk about this for days. And I think part of it's because, for me, in my heart, I believe that, we need humanity in the workplace as much as possible. And it also shifts the way we look at the world. So art at the core it's a lens of how we look at the world. It's a mindset, in fact. The artist is a mindset of how we look at things. It's not just, okay, how can we efficiency the way out of this thing? How can we make it more effective? It's also about how do we make it more aesthetically pleasing?
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that it is something that lights up and brings a soul to what we're doing? Because if we don't feel something from what we're doing, it's not going to last forever. It's not going to last at all. And so I think art and business coming together is really about making something that is built to last, and that also has an emotional connection to the people who interact with whatever we're building. And that's what I think we want. That's why art and business are the true companions that will change the way we look at the future. When we really think about how our businesses are wired, the more beautiful the business, which really I think is a connection to art, the better that people will want to be part of it.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about the activation more of people's right brain, the right hemisphere to activate
Yeah.
the creativity in all of us, because we are all able to tap into that part of us that may be buried. We just need to kind of go down there a little bit, dig down and bring that up to the surface.
Yeah. I mean, even just thinking about the environments that we create where work gets done, think about how the people who have designed those spaces, and even if they're virtual, we are affected by everything around us. And so why not make it more pleasing to us? Because when we feel connected, more energized by that, the better. And I think that is where art really becomes part of the picture, is how can we make sure that we're creating something that's more meaningful to us in that way?
Well stated. Okay, as we wind down here, what's something that maybe we have not covered from the book or from your thought leadership or your work with leaders that our listeners must know?
Yeah. I always like to share this little tidbit. It's a little bit out there, but I'll share it. One of my coaching tools that I work with people on is this thing called expand your vision and narrow your focus. And it's a great little thing for people who feel stuck. So when people are feeling stuck, I say, well, like, you're probably staring at this wall and you're feeling like what to do next. What's the next path? And so I often say, expand your vision, see what else is possible. What are the things that you could potentially be doing that you're not seeing right now because you're looking at the wall. And so when you expand your vision, it can be challenging because now you've got like all these things in your mind. So then you start to see what possibilities you want to experiment with. And once you figure out what that next experiment is, you have to narrow your focus and say, this is what I'm going to do for the next week, next 2 weeks. And that focus will allow you to at least get further in that path. But this expansive and narrowing is how you get things done. I mean, ultimately, it gets people who are stuck unstuck long enough to be able to move forward and get things done, but then also feel as though it's not a forever thing. They can move back into the expansive mode. Make sense?
Yep. Tony, we bring it home with 2 questions, and he didn't get prepped on these, so there will be an element of surprise for you, Tony. So here we go. The first one is tradition on the show. It's the love question. So sticking with any themes of leadership, culture, mindset, or anything from your book, how do I lead with more actionable, practical love and care day in and day out?
Yes. I would start by saying, show more curiosity and compassion to the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things, those 2 C's, which I'm a big fan of C words, curiosity and compassion are so important because they complement each other. And when you're working with people and just meeting with people in general, the more that you can show those 2 C's, curiosity and compassion, then you have deeper connection. And why is that important? Deeper connection allows us to go further together.
Well stated. The book again is called Campfire Lessons for Leaders: How Uncovering Our Past Can Propel Us Forward. Tony, what's your final takeaway from this conversation that you'd like our listeners to walk away with?
Yes, I'm gonna connect with the love and action theme, which is to say, if you find yourself not feeling love in the work that you're doing, get curious.
Mm-hmm.
Get curious of what it's going to take for you to connect with the work and find what lights you up and do more of that.
Yeah. And speaking of getting curious, get curious by purchasing this book because you're not going to be disappointed. The stories and the lessons are priceless on this book. Tony, if people want to connect with you, find out more about you, point them to a few ways, including your website.
Wonderful. So first of all, the website is at ipurposepartners.com. The I is as not in the I, but as in letter I. And if you go there, you can take my assessment, you can find my books, my podcasts, all the fun stuff. And then the other place is on LinkedIn. I'm very prolific on LinkedIn, always sharing new stuff. And you can get my Sparks of Inspiration, my newsletter is available there as well. So LinkedIn, I'm at Tony Martignetti with a 1 at the end instead of an I.
There we go. Tony, it's been a blast. And, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. We're so glad we did the swap.
Yes, this is wonderful. And I look forward to continuing to stay in touch and do wonderful things together.
Absolutely. And folks, you can keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And I'm going to put Tony's contact info, website, and all that stuff on my website. You'll find that in my show notes at marcelschwantes.com. Don't forget the link to watch this very episode on YouTube. And also that will be on my website, marcelschwantes.com. For Tony Martignetti, I'm Marcel. Remember, in the end, love always wins. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.